Navigate Hope presents Green Table Talk. Let's start a conversation. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Today we'll be discussing the mental health influences in educational communities with our guest, Jason Friend, an education teacher at Georgia Cyber Academy. I mean, you've taught in person classrooms, and now you're teaching virtual classrooms. And as you know, it's extremely important for a teacher to build relationships with their students.
Right.
And that's what you're doing as a teacher. You're building a relationship. In a time of social distancing and virtual classrooms, how do you make those connections?
Yeah, as a brick and mortar teacher at the time, I would tell you that was one of the things I felt like I could do best. Um, and it really weighs a lot on, I can see you, I can interact with you. Um, the the dynamic of creating relationship is far easier in that environment. I won't lie that it's a it's a shift in how you cultivate and craft those relationships with your students, and that's definitely a disadvantage of, I would say, a teachers entering into a different type of instruction, it being virtual. If you're doing that, um, it's not impossible. I also
Mm-hmm.
would say that it's something that it takes it takes understanding the technology, understanding also how you know our kids communicate. We have to kind of shift that paradigm. How do I make relationships that are not the way that I'm used to?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how can I how can I reach out and connect to my you know my students in a way that shows them that I understand them, that they feel valued, and in a way that shows that you know I am making an attempt to understand how they communicate, what is important to them. Um, I know I know that that is probably easier done when any barriers from you know communication that might arise from speaking through an email or a text or video chat may be misconstrued, or something of that nature. But I think that if you, as a person, as a teacher, really give the effort of reaching out and communicating specifically with students and using multimedia to do that. So you know, if it's through media, if it's through audio, but really having those conversations with them and connecting with them and talking to them specifically, I think that you can achieve um, connections with students virtually. And I think that the notion of that it's a replacement, and I really want to stress this too,
Mm-hmm.
is that in this time right now, we're thinking about the pandemic, and we're thinking about replicating what we used to have in a virtual environment, and pivoting, and it's really not that. I mean, I sincerely believe, and I sincerely hope sooner than later life will get to go back to what we would understand to be a normal, and hopefully we will have learned something in the process to be able to respond better and more quickly. But like, if something bad happens, you might have to change the way you do things in the short term, and we may have learned that we can't you know we can't expect that students will thrive, uh, entirely on a virtual platform, especially the ones that are it's just not for them, or that's not the way that that they prefer to learn. But if we if we embrace the fact that this is a temporary solution and that there are ways um, to compensate at least in the short term, then we can kind of bridge that gap between you know the time that they have had in the classroom where they were thriving in in a physical environment, and then we can kind of get them into a place where when we do return, we will have lost less time
Hmm.
than if we didn't try. Um, and I really think that that puts more responsibility still back on the teachers to make those efforts to attempt to relate and connect with their students, and to not um, you know
Yeah, I guess it's
yeah.
more of thinking outside the box and just being creative. I think you will see teachers that were like that already in their classrooms. They already thought outside the box on things and they were also very creative. Those are the same teachers that you're going to see thrive during this situation and still being able to reach out to their students. You know, with the current situation with COVID and all the social unrest that's going on, I mean, how do you see that impacting the way schools move forward?
Oh wow. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now, and for me, and trying to be trying to view this from multiple angles. I'm a father. Um, I am also a teacher. So I'm a parent of a student, and I'm having to kind of understand what my constituents, my students' parents from my school, what their lives have to go through, as well as what I'm dealing with in my life, and just how this, you know, there's not one way school can move forward, for all families, and I know that I mean it seems true, like obviously on the surface, but I mean, and it puts a lot of pressure on our leaders in school, for how they're going to make decisions on reopening, or how are we doing instruction, how are we planning for when this happens again, or when we shut down, for if there were an outbreak and we had to do some sort of mitigation. um, it I think has given us a big wake up call that we have to have a plan in place far before something like this happens, and but then there also has to be um, attention to what different people need. And I know with school, and I mean, just hearing what a lot of people have had to talk about, with their students' needs and just the needs of the family. The parents have to go to work, you know, and that's in some ways a non-negotiable for a lot of families. So the kids need to go back to school. They're missing on instruction. They've already lost so many months of of in-person instruction, and that's you know this cohort of kids, the COVID kids, is as I've heard it called already. They're going to be remembered in this time as they've had to you know the the graduates missed their graduation. I mean, all the way down to the youngest, the kiddos have missed um, you know several several months of reading and writing instruction. That at young ages, they may not be able to recover from very easily. So, I mean, missing milestones tests, missing AP exams, graduation requirements, certain things that other schools are going to be looking at. There's just so much stuff that, I mean, what it tells me as an educator is that we need to be mindful that as these times are unprecedented, like so too must our response to them, and we have to figure out a way to um, you know plan for the worst but hope for the best. And I mean, I've seen some school districts, they've had very good virtual school contingencies. Um, and then in other schools, the pandemic caught, the districts off guard. So, um, there weren't a lot of things prepared or already in place. And with my school, as a virtual school, um, by nature, a lot of things were business as usual, whereas the brick and mortar districts had to really scramble to put together virtual programming for the students and the staff. And that's another big piece is just how
Mm-hmm.
do we how do we help our teachers that are not used to using technology and teaching virtually? Um, how do we help them to educate our students who are not used to learning virtually?
I mean, that's a really good point. Teachers that may not be used to technology, and we're going to this um, where some are doing virtual learning, and some are doing in person, and kind of doing a balance of those. Um, so I know, like you stated, that you are, um, teaching as a virtual teacher now. Are you still in
Right.
touch with your in-person teachers,
I keep
friends?
in contact. Yeah. I keep in touch with several teachers, that continue to teach in
Okay.
brick and mortar.
Now, have you heard from them about what their biggest challenges or concerns for the upcoming year are? And even as a virtual teacher, what's your personal concerns?
Well, I'll start with just the people that I know that continue to teach brick and mortar, and I know that at least in some cases, districts have had clever um, solutions to how they're going to address great numbers of people in large space in small spaces rather. Some districts are going to go to a flipped classroom format to where half the students will attend class in person, and then the other half will attend um, virtually for a week,
Mm-hmm.
and then those students rotate each week, so it keeps the physical uh, student numbers in the building down to kind of mitigate transmission if exposures, and
Gotcha.
then those other students get to do those lessons and content in that flipped classroom kind of style. If you're not familiar with the flipped classroom, it's essentially you um, you do a lot of the work at home, uh, like the lesson at home, and then you come back at school, and the teacher kind of debriefs you on it. So um, it's a different format. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but one of the benefits to something like this, I mean, from what I can see, is that it addresses the challenge that we're trying to um, lower the number of students that are being exposed to others um, in the classrooms, and also still kind of embrace options that some families may not have the option to do virtual, and they want to do the physical. So and I know some of those teachers have been nervous about how they can manage that workload. What will that look like from a workload perspective? I mean, and already for teachers that in a profession where you spend a lot of time uh, documenting, your lessons and your instruction and the evaluations. It's difficult um, to demonstrate a lot of those compliance pieces when
Mm-hmm.
we're so focused on the pandemic, and really we're just trying to survive, and we're just trying to get out of this. You know unscathed, or how do we, I don't know a single person who hasn't been impacted by the pandemic, uh, personally, if not, just in that it's interrupted, everyone's lives, obviously. But how do we how do we still function in, in our jobs where, I know a lot of folks are, you know, for me I've worked in the schools as a brick and mortar teacher, but now I get to teach virtually, and that's a true, you know, blessing for me. And I know that a lot of people don't get to have that opportunity, and even so, when a lot of individuals are working remotely, it's still it's still such a challenging time to expect that business should be conducted as normal, um, when nothing about this time is normal. If you're able to work from home, it's it's not the same as you working at your job like you would on an ordinary day. So it's like productivity is down, and especially for people that are just not used to that. So it's like I sympathize with those people that are just not experienced, with the platforms that are provided to do the online, teaching, online learning for the students. It's just been kind of thrust at them very quickly, and there's not been a lot of time to really adapt and move over to that.
No, that's really interesting. What you brought up before about the flexibility that a teacher is going to have in learning some of these things, as well as, the responsibilities, the pressures of all these responsibilities as a teacher. Now, over the years, I mean, the responsibilities of teachers has increased, so much. And it's not just about teaching anymore, as you know. And with all the heaviness that's in the world right now, that's affecting everybody's mental health. Do you, as a teacher, feel prepared to address the mental health needs of the student?
You know, I think it's very it's very evident when you look at yourself and you think about how has the pandemic, affected you personally, and you reflect on that, um, and then you just try to put yourself in the shoes of the kids that, you know this isn't normal for them either, um, and what it must be doing for everyone's mental health, not just your own. I mean, it seems obvious at first, but then, I mean, for me, I look at, my students, and it's been very evident that, you know our students are, um, just disproportionately affected, because we don't necessarily address um, how large the impact has been on the routine and the norms that they were used to have been disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think of like my son, who, um, he spends, you know his time in school, being sociable. Those are things that are not happening right now, for him. And especially even if it's a virtual environment, those are things that you don't get to have, moving, into that, from another perspective too, addressing, you know, the needs of our students, not just academically, but their emotional mental health needs. Um, it's challenging um, when when everyone's kind of dealing with the same thing. It's difficult to it's difficult to always know um, how to approach that when we should all be having these conversations with our students, anxieties and other types of things that are affecting them. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, um, which is normal, but there's a lot of nothing has changed, at least in the short term, where we still have a very difficult uh, time in society normalizing mental illness, mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and also being able to have those conversations and open up the dialogue and understand what other people are dealing with. Um, that stigma that is so prevalent, you know, continues even in the midst of this. So those are still challenges. So does it make me feel like I'm prepared to address the mental health needs of my students? I would say at times, um, because I'm cognizant of what I deal with, I feel like I can perhaps speak on it, but then there's still the you still have to gauge with your students, your parents, your all your constituents on, are they prepared to listen to um, to what you have to say and to understand you know anxiety is okay. It's okay to be scared right now. It's okay to be scared to send your kids to school. It's okay to be afraid about the pandemic. It's okay to be, um, you know, to ask questions and to ask, are the students going to be wearing masks? I'm afraid of how this is going to affect my family. I'm afraid of, is my student going to, you know, are they going to be prepared for the next, school year? And then as a teacher, how am I helping my students get through this? Are their grades being affected? Am I
Mm-hmm.
able to even be a teacher at, the bare minimum? And is my instruction even pertinent to them in the midst of something that's just so much greater of a just impactful, and such a strange time that we're in right now,
Man, wow,
in a, you know,
yeah, that's a lot. I mean, do you feel that, you know, that the schools should be responsible for helping prepare the teachers to
I've
address
always
their
felt,
students' needs like that?
yeah, I've always felt that, students in the schools, are, well, let me back up. We as teachers, are there with the students one on one every single day. And as a teacher, you're promoting learning. You never stop learning. That's what the mantra, that we tell our students every day. And as a teacher, this is also true, is you don't want to stagnate and to not continue to grow yourself. And my mentality has always been that I feel schools and the administration and the district should be more active in really helping continuing the growth of the teachers, how that we so that we could better inform our students and help them grow, and specifically in these items such as mental health, or there's social emotional um, growth in the midst of something like this. And this is a really great time to address where we are lacking.
Mm.
um, and if schools could provide um, professional development, um, more akin to helping understand and recognize what our students are dealing with, how to observe and be aware of, the um, you know, mental health, just awareness checks with our students, and be able to address, how is my class doing today? Um, are they, is everyone going home each day, adequately content and happy, and do they feel safe? Do they feel, like they are able to feel valued in my class, and these are all you know these are all things that I feel like if districts provided professionals to come in and help educate the staff and faculty on how to assess and address mental health needs of our students in real time and just on a daily basis, um, then our students would be all the better. Um, over time, we learned to, as teachers, to see if our students have, basic needs met, like, okay, are they coming to school with their clothes, and clean clothes, and do they have their, resources and materials? But I think more importantly, at times, we forget that we're not addressing how they feel emotionally. And when that's so important to every individual person, anyone that's ever woken up on a day and known that they feel un, just emotionally incapable of, you know, a mundane task or something, even just arbitrary to say the least, because of a mental health or mental illness issue. These are things that we should be able to look at and address with our students.
Yeah,
And it all takes
you really
just being
touched on
aware of them.
something real good there, and so that brings me back to, I mean, you're a parent of a school aged child. So how do you talk to your child about these increased anxieties and these different fears about going back to school that you've touched on?
Yeah. Um, and that's been difficult, because there are many objectives to what any parent is going to have for sending their child to school. Myself, obviously, I want my kid to be um, continuing to develop on grade level. I want him to meet his goals. I want him to continue to receive his services through the school, um, and I want all of the ordinary things that come with what you would expect from your child going to school, growing social, emotional, and academic, um, on all of those areas. So for me, in this different environment, it's challenging to address a real fear when I have to have a conversation with my 10-year-old and explain to him that I'm nervous for him to go to school because I don't want him to get sick, or I don't want him to possibly spread, or get exposed and spread to others, or bring possibly, you know, um, the coronavirus home. Those are those are conversations you feel like you shouldn't have to have with a child, but they're very real conversations, and you have to have those talks. And we have, just as you have a fire drill or a tornado drill, we have now, it's normal for us to have you know coronavirus safety talks, and we talk about you know, how we wear the mask at school and how often are we going to wash hands, and just talking about ordinary hygiene and pandemic awareness essentially. I mean, it's it's almost absurd that you feel like you would have to talk about this, but we're in that environment. Um and it's hard to and with a child with special needs, to have that kind of a conversation at times adds an extra layer of anxiety to them, because I want to have, I want my son to be able to attend school in whatever way is safest for him, but I also want him to feel safe. So even if he were to attend school um, in person and doing all the appropriate things, I also care about his sphere. And I know that he understands very real the risks of, of what the pandemic is and what it means. And those are stressors that you have to weigh on the mind of a 10-year-old or, a child with autism. Um, and or just with anyone. I mean, I'm 33 in about 2 weeks, and I mean, I have I have immense stress. Every day you know, with whether it's just going to work, uh, you know, professional development. I mean, which fortunately we've been able to do a lot of our professional development remotely. Um, but I also am aware, like, that that is just not the case for a lot of other people, and I've had the luxury of being able to do that, and a lot of other parents will not get to. And you know it's just kind of, it's been scary. It's scary for me. I can't imagine how scary it is for some of our students, and it takes a, I mean, there's a mature uh, mind when it comes to understanding the gravity of it all, and understanding your personal responsibility of protecting yourself, protecting your families, and your friends.
Jason, man, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, taking some time out of your day.
Absolutely. And I think that these are talks that we all need to be okay with having, um, and we need to be easy on ourselves too, because few people today have ever had to live through anything like this, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that everyone's reaction is valid. Um, and if it's fear that you feel and confusion, um, then that's something that needs to be, you know, respected. And I hope that over time we're gonna see that our families and our parents and students are stronger, and understand what needs to happen in the future, um, moving forward. So.
Thank you again for listening, and we hope to have you back at the Green Table for more conversations. For more information, visit www.navhope.org.